Before we dive in, I've got a quick question for you. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far and wide our viewers are tuning in. Now, imagine this. Jin-woo, the relentless Shadow Monarch, suddenly enters the Hell's Paradise universe. What happens next? Let's find out. The sea surrounding Kotaku Island is unnaturally still when the condemned ships approach its shores, heavy with criminals promised freedom in exchange for an impossible miracle. Gabimaru stands at the bow like a statue carved from indifference, while Sagiri watches him with the sharp caution of someone who knows restraint can snap without warning. The island looms ahead, beautiful in a way that feels wrong, flowers blooming in impossible colors along cliffs that seem almost too symmetrical to be natural. Then the sky fractures, not with thunder, not with lightning, but with a silent tear that splits the air open like paper being ripped by an unseen hand. Black mist spills downward in a slow spiral, and from within it, Jin-woo descends. He does not crash onto the deck. He lands as if he chose that exact spot long before the world knew it existed. His boots touch the wood with controlled weight, coat shifting once in the sea breeze before settling behind him. His expression is calm, focused, and unreadable. The prisoners recoil instinctively because predators recognize hierarchy faster than anyone. Sagiri's hand tightens around her blade, not out of panic but discipline. Something about this man bends the atmosphere around him. It is not wild, killing intent. It is authority, quiet, and absolute. Before anyone can demand answers, the island reacts. Along the distant shoreline, flowers bloom violently, petals unfurling in rapid succession as if time itself has accelerated for them alone. Vines twist and coil, burrowing through sand and rock. The air thickens with sweet fragrance that carries the promise of death beneath its perfume. Jin-woo's shadow stretches across the deck, darker than it should be under daylight, and the moment it touches the wood, the pulse beneath the island intensifies. He feels it instantly. This is not mana, not the structured magic of dungeons. It is something organic, circulating through roots and soil like blood through veins, probing him in return. The system within him responds automatically, assessing, calculating, adapting. The ships barely anchor before chaos erupts. Sailors collapse as spores drift across the water. One prisoner screams as a vine lashes around his torso and drags him overboard, the sea below erupting in blossoms lined with teeth. Gabimaru moves without hesitation, blade flashing as he severs tendrils mid-air, his expression unchanged even as blood stains the sand. The other criminals follow, survival overriding fear. Jin-woo steps onto the shore last. The ground beneath his boots gives a subtle pulse, as if the island itself flinches. From the tree line, figures emerge with unsettling grace. The doshi appear almost human at first glance. Their forms elegant, faces composed, but their skin is threaded with floral veins and layered with petals that shift like living armor. One tilts its head toward Jin-woo with open curiosity, as though examining a specimen that does not belong in this ecosystem. There is no immediate attack, only observation, measurement. A vine snaps toward Jin-woo's throat with lethal precision. It never reaches him. A crimson blade intercepts it in a burst of sparks as Igris materializes from the darkness at his master's feet, silent and imposing. The temperature of the battlefield changes instantly. The doshi's calm expression tightens. Jin-woo does not speak, he does not posture. He simply allows his shadow to expand. Iron rises next, massive and immovable, emerging like a fortress pulled from the abyss. The sand darkens as shadow spreads outward in a widening circle, swallowing light and redefining the battlefield. The prisoners freeze for half a second despite themselves. Even Gabimaru's sharp eyes are narrow in calculation. This is not another criminal seeking immortality. This is something that commands death itself. The largest of the doshi steps forward, floral armor overlapping across its towering frame, serene face betraying no emotion as it raises one hand toward the forest behind it. The trees respond immediately. Trunks split open. Petals harden into blades. The ground ruptures as something massive shifts beneath the soil. The island has finished observing. Now it moves to erase the anomaly standing on its shore. The sand splits open without warning. Roots thicker than ship masts burst upward in violent spirals, scattering criminals like debris in a storm. One of the Asaiman barely avoids being impaled as a spear of hardened bark tears through the ground where he stood a heartbeat earlier. The doshi lowers its hand slowly, almost gracefully, as if conducting an orchestra rather than unleashing slaughter. The island is not attacking blindly. It is applying pressure, testing durability, searching for weakness. Jin-woo steps forward. The movement is small, but the battlefield shifts around it. His gaze sharpens, tracking the rhythm of the island's energy. The pulse beneath the soil is synchronized. The vines are not independent organisms. They are extensions of a central flow. Information travels through them. Commands ripple outward from somewhere deeper within the island. This is not chaos. It is a system. A massive vine slams downward with enough force to crater the shore. Iron intercepts it head-on, an armored body absorbing the impact with a thunderous shockwave that sends sand flying in all directions. The prisoners stagger backward. Gabimaru uses the opening to dash forward, blades flashing as he slices through smaller tendrils with surgical precision. He moves efficiently, conserving energy, but his eyes never leave Jin-woo for long. He understands instinctively that the stranger is the true center of gravity here. The doshi finally advances. Its steps are soundless despite its size. Petals shift across its arms, tightening into layered shields. With a sudden acceleration that defies its serene expression, it appears before Igris and strikes. The impact forces the knight backward several meters, boots carving trenches through the sand. The doshi's palm glows faintly with a strange inner light as it releases a concentrated burst of organic energy that distorts the air on contact. Jin-woo does not flinch. He raises one hand slightly, and dozens of shadows ripple outward from his feet like living smoke. They surge across the battlefield, intercepting vines, dragging screaming plant creatures into darkness, overwhelming lesser doshi with ruthless coordination. Each shadow moves with purpose. No wasted motion, no hesitation. This is not an army fueled by desperation. It is an extension of will. The island responds by escalating. The forest behind the doshi bends inward, branches twisting together as if stitched by invisible hands. Flesh and bark fuse. Faces emerge briefly from within trunks, mouths open in silent agony before being reabsorbed into the mass. A colossal abomination tears itself free from the tree line, its body a grotesque union of petals, bone, and root. It does not walk. It drags itself forward, crushing its own creations beneath its weight. Several criminals break formation and run. They do not make it far. The ground liquefies beneath their feet, swallowing them into a churning bed of blossoms that close over their bodies with sickening finality. The message is clear. There is no retreat, only survival through dominance. Jin-woo studies the towering creature for half a second. The energy flow inside it is denser, reinforced. The island has invested resources into this construct. Good. That means destroying it will send a signal. He steps forward again. This time the shadows move first. Igris launches into the air, blade carving a black arc through the sky as he descends toward the creature's upper mass. Iron charges from the flank, shoulder lowered, colliding with the abomination's lower body and forcing it sideways. The impact splits bark and sends shards of hardened petals scattering like shrapnel. Smaller shadows swarm upward, climbing the creature's limbs and hacking into joints with relentless efficiency. The doshi watches without expression. Then it moves to intervene. It appears beside Jin-woo in an instant, palm thrusting forward with lethal intent, targeting the heart. The speed would have ended most warriors before they registered the attack. Jin-woo pivots smoothly, narrowly avoiding the strike as the ground behind him detonates from the released force. The doshi follows with a spinning kick, petals slicing outward like blades. Jin-woo blocks with his dagger, metal grinding against organic armor, sparks flashing between them. For the first time, their eyes meet at close range. There is recognition there. Not fear, not yet, but acknowledgement. The island understands that this opponent will not be erased easily. Jin-woo shifts his footing and drives his knee forward, forcing the doshi back just enough to create space. The creature glides across the sand instead of stumbling, petals realigning seamlessly over the shallow cut Igris managed to carve earlier. Regeneration, immediate and efficient. The energy circulating through its body tightens like muscle fiber knitting itself together. Jin-woo registers the speed of recovery and adjusts his expectations. Brute force alone will prolong this fight. Prolonged fights allow unknown variables to surface. That is unacceptable. Behind them, the colossal abomination finally collapses under coordinated assault. Igris pierces through what serves as its core, blade sinking deep into a cluster of luminous veins. Iron follows by tearing the mass apart with raw force, ripping sections free and slamming them into the ground until the structure stops moving. The remaining shadows descend without mercy, carving the fallen construct into fragments that twitch briefly before going still. The sand drinks the dark fluid leaking from its remains. For a fraction of a second, the island hesitates. The pulse beneath the ground stutters. The doshi reacts instantly, thrusting both hands toward Jin-woo as vines erupt from every direction in a synchronized cage meant to crush him from all sides. The air fills with the scent of crushed petals and iron. From a distance, it looks as though the forest itself is folding inward to consume a single point. Black energy detonates outward in response. Jin-woo releases a concentrated surge of shadow, shredding the incoming vines before they can tighten. The shockwave forces nearby trees to splinter and clears a circle around him, carving a temporary void in the chaos. His eyes narrow as he pinpoints the denser flow of organic energy converging on the doshi. The creature is not acting independently. It is a node, a relay channeling instructions from deeper within the island. Then he decides to test something. He vanishes, not retreating, not repositioning slowly, but disappearing into motion too fast for the eye to track. He reappears behind the doshi and drives both daggers forward with surgical precision, targeting the intersection where multiple energy lines converge along its spine. The blades pierce through layers of petal armor and sink into pulsing tissue beneath. The doshi stiffens. For the first time, its serene composure cracks. Energy erupts violently from the wound, knocking Jin-woo backward as the creature attempts to purge the intrusion. Petals whip outward in a desperate defensive spiral, slicing through several lesser shadows and dispersing them into smoke. But the damage is done. The luminous veins across its body flicker irregularly. The regenerative flow is disrupted. Jin-woo lands smoothly and raises his hand. Igris understands instantly. The knight surges forward in perfect synchronization, crimson blade flashing as he drives it through the doshi's exposed core from the front, while Jin-woo lunges again from behind. Their attacks converge with brutal precision. Steel and shadow tear through organic armor and into the concentrated heart of the island's relay system. The doshi's body convulses. The surrounding vines collapse lifelessly onto the sand. The forest trembles. For a brief moment, silence spreads across the battlefield. Even the wind seems to hold its breath. The criminals and Asaemon stare, unable to fully comprehend what they are witnessing. Gabimaru lowers his blade slightly, studying Jin-woo with sharper interest now. This is no reckless invader. This is calculated domination. The doshi drops to one knee. Cracks of dark energy spiderweb across its floral exterior as the internal flow destabilizes further. Its eyes lift toward Jin-woo and something shifts within them. Not hatred, not fear, awareness. as if it finally recognizes that the predator standing before it exists outside the island's understanding of life and death. The pulse beneath the soil surges violently in response. Deep within Kotaku Island, something else awakens. Roots recoil and then tighten, redirecting energy toward the fallen doshi in a last attempt to preserve it. Light courses through the creature's veins again, forcing its wounds to begin closing despite the impaled blades. The island is trying to reclaim its peace. Jin-woo feels the surge and understands immediately. If he allows the regeneration to complete, this cycle will repeat endlessly. He needs finality. His shadow stretches across the kneeling doshi, swallowing its lower body first, then creeping upward like an eclipse consuming the sun. The surrounding air grows heavier, darker, as if gravity itself is bending toward him. The criminals instinctively step back. Even Sagiri feels a chill she cannot rationalize. The doshi attempts one last strike, arm snapping upward toward Jin-woo's throat. He catches it midair. With calm, controlled force, he drives his dagger deeper into the core. Black energy floods inward. The luminous veins extinguish one by one. The island's pulse falters again, this time longer. The doshi's body goes slack. And for the first time since setting foot on Kotaku Island, Jin-woo reaches for something beyond mere victory. He reaches for ownership. The shadows respond instantly, spilling over the fallen doshi like a tide of darkness claiming land. They crawl along its body, merging with the remnants of the energy veins and absorbing every trace of its strength. The island does not react as it did before. Its pulse flickers, falters, and then surges violently as if the death of its guardian is a personal offense. From deep within the forest, a low vibration spreads through the sand and roots, shaking everything standing. Trees shudder violently, petals snap off midair, and the ground itself seems to shiver under the weight of some unseen judgment. Yet Jin-woo stands unshaken, observing, calculating, commanding. He does not fight the island directly. He waits, letting the aftermath of his attack demonstrate his dominance. The prisoners stare, frozen in terror and disbelief. One of them attempts to speak, to demand answers, but no words can match what they're seeing. The creatures that had stalked them seconds before, the doshi, the colossal plant abominations, lie defeated, drained, or absorbed. Shadows linger over the battlefield, as if whispering a silent message. There is no escape from him. Even Gabimaru's stoic face betrays a flicker of uncertainty. He has faced monsters, assassins, even immortals, but he has never seen someone who bends life and death itself into an obedient weapon. Sagiri tightens her grip on her blade, the weight of responsibility pressing against her chest. She feels the island judging Jin-woo and, by extension, questioning their own place in this unfolding nightmare. The remnants of the doshi convulse one last time before the shadows finish their work. Jin-woo lowers his hands and surveys the battlefield. The sand, once pristine, is a dark mosaic of trampled petals, cracked earth, and scorched marks where shadow energy licked the surface. Around him, the forest hesitates. The flowers on the cliffs stop swaying. The giant roots, previously writhing like serpents, pause mid-motion, awaiting instruction from something they cannot comprehend. The island has recognized an anomaly. It is understood, perhaps for the first time, that something has arrived which exists outside its systems, outside its rules, outside the chain of life and death it has enforced for centuries. In the tree line, remaining doshi and lesser guardians retreat, not in cowardice, but in recognition of hierarchy. They are acknowledging a predator unlike any they have ever faced. The humans on the shore, prisoners and asaemon alike, dare not move. Gabimaru steps forward cautiously, studying Jin-woo from head to toe. There is tension, a silent calculation running across his mind. He recognizes strength, but he also senses that this is not strength that can be reasoned with or bargained with. Sagiri's gaze flicks to him briefly, silent communication passing between them. They know this is beyond the elixir, beyond survival. This is domination. Jin-woo does not speak. He never needs to. His aura communicates far more than words ever could. Shadows twitch at his feet, restless and eager, sensing the residual energy from the Doshi's defeat. Iron and Igris stand like sentinels, emanating calm violence. The air grows thick as the island itself seems to respond with indignation, sending tremors through the sand. Then, from somewhere beneath the surface, a new pulse begins, a deeper, more insistent rhythm that thrums like a heartbeat amplified 1,000-fold. It is alive, and it knows him now. The central flow of the island's energy, the network that guides every plant, every root, every petal, begins to stir. The attempt to eliminate Jin-woo has failed, and the island is beginning to wake in earnest. Jin-woo's gaze narrows slightly, scanning the horizon where the dense forest meets jagged cliffs. He senses the invisible web beneath the ground twisting and moving in response to his presence, probing for weaknesses, for answers. He steps forward, letting his shadow expand further, letting it flow into the cracks and crevices of the battlefield. The first Doshi is gone, but its death has sent ripples across the network. Smaller creatures that had not even engaged in combat twist and writhe as the island experiments, testing, seeking, learning. Every motion it makes is countered by instinctive calculation within Jin-woo's mind. The Shadow Monarch is learning faster than the island ever could, and for the first time, the organic flow feels challenged. A sudden, violent eruption shatters the calm. Roots as thick as ship masts explode from the ground ahead, forming a living barricade aimed to contain him. He does not falter. Shadows lash outward like liquid steel, slicing through the new assault with surgical precision. Igris and iron move in perfect harmony, striking at multiple angles, cutting, cleaving, forcing the organic wall to collapse. The island reacts again, pushing further, sending tendrils and vines that twist unpredictably. But each attack is met with anticipation and precision. Jin-woo's movements are fluid, calculated, almost elegant in their efficiency, turning a battlefield that should have been overwhelming into a controlled environment where he dictates the tempo. As the dust settles, the island seems to acknowledge the truth. The Shadow Monarch is not just a threat. He is a force beyond its comprehension. Where creatures once roamed freely, now shadows cling to the ruins, guarding every inch of territory Jin-woo claims with silent obedience. The first Doshi lies in pieces, absorbed, analyzed, rendered useless to the island system. Jin-woo does not linger. He moves forward, each step purposeful, every shadow trailing him like a living extension of his will. The pulse beneath the soil trembles once more, deeper this time, sending vibrations through the sand that hint at a deeper awakening, a response to the presence that refuses to be broken. The island is alive. It is dangerous, and it has finally recognized an adversary it cannot destroy with force alone. Jin-woo's shadow stretches across the battlefield like an eclipse, swallowing the light, and for the first time, the Hell's Paradise universe understands that death itself now has a new master. The island has rejected him, but in doing so, it has awakened something far greater. The air thickens, flowers shiver along the cliffs, and roots writhe beneath the surface as the first tremors of a response echo from deep within Kotaku Island. Jin-woo pauses, his eyes scanning the horizon, calculating the next phase. The Doshi is gone. The immediate threat neutralized, yet the pulse, the heartbeat of the island itself, quickens in recognition, signaling that far more formidable challenges are still to come. Shadows coil at his feet, restless and ready, and Jin-woo steps forward into the forest, knowing that this is only the beginning of his dominion over a land that has never encountered anything like him before. The forest ahead pulses with an almost sentient rhythm as Jin-woo steps deeper into the heart of Kotaku Island. Every leaf, every root seems to tremble at his presence, and yet he moves with ease, shadows stretching to absorb and neutralize the minor threats that skitter through the undergrowth. The air smells of blooming flowers tinged with decay, a scent both intoxicating and suffocating. He senses it instantly. The flow of energy here is different. It is not mana, not dungeons, not the controlled power he is accustomed to. This is Tao, alive and pulsing, a living force that bends reality itself. It moves through the roots, through the soil, through creatures that are half-formed by the island's twisted experiments. It is precise, refined, and deadly, and it watches him as intently as he watches it. From the shadows of a twisted, flowering tree, a figure emerges. Ran, one of the Tensen, steps forward with elegance that contrasts violently with the brutality of the island around them. His eyes are sharp, calculating, and they shine with an unnatural light. His body flows with Tao, muscles shifting subtly, contours of his form warping as if the air itself molds to his will. He does not attack immediately. Instead, he tilts his head, studying Jin-woo, and the air ripples, distorting in strange, disorienting waves that make shadows dance unnaturally. Jin-woo's own senses flare. He realizes quickly that Tao is not just energy, it is intention given form, a pattern that flows and reshapes itself dynamically in response to his presence. One misstep, and he could find himself immobilized or worse, absorbed into a construct he cannot even begin to understand. The tension between them is immediate. Ran moves with speed that is almost imperceptible, his form flickering through space as he lands in multiple positions in a blink, forcing Jin-woo's shadows to react before he even makes a decision. This is not just combat, this is a duel of perception, a dance of energy and reaction. Jin-woo recognizes the pattern almost instantly. He adapts, weaving shadows into precise counterpoints, striking to disrupt the flow rather than to kill outright. Every blade, every extension of shadow meets resistance, dissipates, or is drawn into the Tao flow, nullified by the Tensen's control. Jin-woo feels the first real pressure he has faced on the island. His shadows hesitate, sensing the imbalance, and he realizes that here, raw strength will not be enough. Instead of striking recklessly, Jin-woo begins to observe. He notes the timing of Ran's movements, the pulse of energy that radiates from his core, the way the Tao seems to regenerate after every minor disruption. He allows his shadows to take minor blows, calculating their limits, recording the regenerative cycles, and mentally mapping the flow of Tao as though it were another dungeon system. Each sacrifice of a lesser shadow is deliberate, each clash a test of timing, resilience, and reaction. Jin-woo is patient. He knows this is a learning ground, a battlefield, and a classroom combined, and every second of engagement teaches him more about this alien living energy. Ran's attacks escalate. The Tao manifests in impossible ways, warping space to extend the reach of his limbs, bending perception so that Jin-woo's eyes see multiple images at once. Shadows collide with illusions and emerge shredded, fragments absorbed back into the island's pulse. The ground beneath their feet ripples, sending waves of force that threaten to destabilize the battlefield entirely. Jin-woo adjusts continuously, never committing fully to any strike until he can trace a clear path through the chaotic flow. He recognizes that Ran's regeneration is not merely healing flesh. It is Tao restoring form, reshaping matter to its intended design. Every cut, every strike, is absorbed into a system he cannot directly overpower. Jin-woo realizes that direct confrontation will prolong their fight indefinitely. He shifts tactics. Instead of attempting to destroy Ran outright, he allows controlled damage, using his shadows as probes, pushing them into precise locations to siphon energy, test regenerative limits, and learn the rhythm of the Tao. Each shadow acts independently, absorbing micro-variations in flow, feeding information back instantly to Jin-woo. Igris and Iron engage only when necessary, their attacks designed to distract or force openings. Jin-woo is learning, and the battlefield itself becomes his instrument. With each exchange, Jin-woo notes a pattern. Tao has thresholds, cycles of absorption and regeneration, windows where the system is vulnerable. By calculating these windows, he begins to adapt. He times his strikes with microsecond precision, landing blows that destabilize the flow momentarily, then retreats, letting shadows absorb the residual energy. Ran is forced to compensate rapidly, and even the Tensen's fluid, shape-shifting form begins to falter, ever so slightly. Jin-woo is not merely surviving, he is imposing his understanding onto the Tao, bending it in ways it was never designed to resist. Finally, a decisive moment arrives. A coordinated strike from Igris and Jin-woo breaks through one of Ran's regenerative nodes. Energy surges violently, cracks spider webbing across the Tensen's form as his Tao flares erratically. Ran stumbles, disrupted, exposed. Jin-woo steps forward, shadows converging around his daggers, and strikes with ruthless precision. He does not aim to kill yet. Instead, he extracts, siphoning a fragment of Tao from the fallen Tensen into the shadow network. This is no mere attack, it is assimilation, a transfer of energy and knowledge. The shadows absorb it instantly, reshaping themselves, adapting with new strength, learning to mimic regenerative patterns on a smaller scale. Ran falls to his knees, his breathing ragged, Tao flickering unevenly across his form. Jin-woo stands above him, a calm, imposing figure, shadows coiling like living extensions of his will. The forest around them trembles, roots recoil, flowers shiver, and the pulse of the island flickers violently, sensing a threat it cannot comprehend. One of its elite, a Tensen who had never faltered in centuries, has been broken and partially absorbed. Jin-woo's eyes glint with understanding. This is the key to the island. Its immortality, its regenerative cycles, its strength, all of it can be studied, analyzed, and incorporated. Shadows stretch outward, crawling across the ground toward other emerging threats. Each absorbed fragment of Tao strengthens them, increasing their speed, adaptability, and lethality. Jin-woo does not celebrate. He does not pause. He knows the island itself will respond more aggressively now that the pulse beneath the soil is gathering, preparing, seeking to correct this intrusion. Yet for the first time he senses an advantage. He understands the rhythm of Tao, the limits of regeneration, and the patterns of elite Tensen combat. The knowledge itself is a weapon, and Jin-woo is already using it to turn the island's own power against it. The forest trembles again as Jin-woo advances, shadows stretching farther, merging with the roots and vines as if claiming territory before a battle has even begun. The air is thick with the scent of decay and blooming flowers, a paradox that only amplifies the tension. From the tree line, another Tensen emerges, this one larger, more disciplined, radiating an aura that bends the space around him. His form flickers subtly, Tao twisting around his limbs like liquid armor, each movement precise, measured, and deadly. Jin-woo pauses only briefly, scanning every micro-movement, every fluctuation of energy. He knows immediately that this is not just a test of strength. It is a test of perception, adaptation, and control. Shadows shift around him, curling and stretching into blades, shields, and tendrils, ready to act the instant a weakness is detected. Tensen strikes first, warping the air with a flick of his wrist, a slash that fractures the visual field. Shadows lunge forward, colliding with the distorted strike, absorbing some of the force, but others are shredded, dissipating into black mist. Jin-woo recognizes the pattern instantly, noting the delay in regeneration. The moment when the Tao flow falters just long enough to create an opening. He does not hesitate. He sends a cluster of shadows in a precise trajectory to intercept the next strike, then spins, daggers flashing in coordination with the shadow's movement, landing a blow that cracks Tensen's energy armor. The node disrupts, Tao flaring unevenly across his body. Even the elite cannot maintain perfection under constant calculated pressure. Jin-woo does not slow his momentum. He allows his shadows to absorb minor attacks, to fail, to learn, each one feeding data directly into his consciousness. Every regenerative pulse the Tenzin emits is measured, analyzed, and used to strengthen the next shadow. Igris leaps, blade-cutting arcs through reality-warped space, while iron charges, forcing the Tenzin to divide attention. Jin-woo remains fluid, anticipating the countermeasures before they happen. His eyes track every flicker, every pulse of energy, and he begins to manipulate the battlefield subtly. He does not fight to dominate physically yet. He fights to understand, to map, to internalize. The Tenzin realizes something is wrong. His movements grow more aggressive, more erratic. Tao bends around his attacks unpredictably, but Jin-woo's shadows adapt faster. One shadow slips under a strike, moving almost independently of him, and strikes a regenerative node directly. Energy erupts violently, the pulse radiating outward, shaking the surrounding trees. The Tenzin staggers backward, forced onto one knee, trying to stabilize the flow. Jin-woo watches calmly. This is the moment. He steps forward, sending Igris to finish the node's destabilization, while his shadows siphon fragments of Tao from the wound. The energy does not vanish. It is absorbed, stored, and reshaped into the growing network beneath his command. The forest reacts violently. Roots snap, petals fly in spirals, and smaller creatures, drawn to the energy, rush to defend the Tenzin. Jin-woo does not flinch. Shadows lash outward in calculated arcs, cutting down attackers before they reach the core of his position. Each absorbed fragment of Tao strengthens the shadows further, granting them micro-regenerative abilities and predictive reflexes, essentially mimicking the Tenzin's power on a smaller, controlled scale. He is no longer just observing. He is adapting, evolving, learning the rules of this universe in real time. Ran's counterpart collapses slightly, Tao flickering across his form as Jin-woo steps closer, shadows coiling like living armor around his frame. Tenzin's eyes widened in shock, not at the attack itself, but at the audacity of assimilation, the calculated extraction of life and energy. Jin-woo does not speak. He does not need to. His actions convey intent and authority far louder than any words. The forest falls silent for a heartbeat, the pulse of the island faltering as if considering a retreat, only to surge again as the central network detects the anomaly. Jin-woo senses the escalation immediately. He knows that the elite of the island will respond in kind, that the remaining Tenzin are already recalibrating, preparing for a level of confrontation the island has never seen. Without hesitation, Jin-woo advances, shadows spiraling like liquid tendrils around his form, converging into blades and spikes ready to strike. Igris and iron flank him seamlessly, moving as extensions of his will, striking whenever a weakness is detected. The Tenzin attempts to warp space again, twisting limbs in impossible angles, forcing the shadows to react with reflexive speed. Each strike is analyzed, absorbed, and stored mentally by Jin-woo. Every regenerative pattern is logged. Every disruption is exploited. Slowly, methodically, he begins to impose his understanding on the battlefield itself, bending Tao to the rhythms of shadow, turning the once unassailable force into a system he can predict, manipulate, and ultimately control. The Tenzin falters again. Energy flickers unevenly along his limbs, cracks forming where Tao cannot regenerate fast enough to keep up with Jin-woo's precise assaults. Even the elite, centuries-old warriors perfected in Tao cannot match this combination of observation, adaptation, and predatory instinct. Jin-woo moves with lethal efficiency, strikes landing not to kill but to extract, siphoning essence, assimilating knowledge, and feeding it into his ever-expanding shadow network. The forest convulses around them, the pulse beneath the soil surging in violent protest, yet Jin-woo remains untouched by its attempt to disrupt him. He has become both hunter and analyst, predator and student, learning the lifeblood of this island through conflict, through blood, and through the mastery of his own shadows. The Tensen stumbles backward, one knee pressed into the soil, his chest heaving as the Tao within him flickers unpredictably. Jin-woo does not pause. Shadows ripple outward from his form like a living tide, flowing across the battlefield, slicing, stabbing, and coiling into every opening. Each fragment of energy siphoned from the Tensen is absorbed into the network, strengthening the shadows and refining their understanding of Tao. They do not merely mimic what they see, they adapt. Tiny micro-regenerative pulses spark within them, a subtle echo of the Tensen's own abilities, granting Jin-woo's army resilience and reflexes far beyond ordinary shadow constructs. The forest convulses around them, roots twisting violently, petals snapping as if in protest. Yet he moves calmly, methodically, a predator dancing on the edge of a living nightmare. Rand's eyes widen as he realizes the extent of the absorption. His Tao, which has never faltered under the pressure of his own strength or the chaos of the island, is being torn apart piece by piece. Every strike he launches is met with precise anticipation, every regenerative cycle intercepted and studied. Jin-woo's shadows move independently yet in perfect harmony, each one responding to disturbances and relaying information instantly. The Tensen falters again, staggering under the strain of attacks that are simultaneous yet almost imperceptible. Each strike is designed not to kill, but to extract, to learn, to replicate the Tao itself. The forest, sensing the imbalance, sends more constructs forward, smaller doshi and twisted plant guardians swarming like insects. But each one is intercepted before reaching Jin-woo. Igris launches into the air, blade flashing crimson, as he intercepts a colossal root that snaps toward Jin-woo's throat, severing it cleanly before it can complete its strike. Iron charges simultaneously, body colliding with a cluster of plant guardians, tearing them apart with brutal efficiency. Jin-woo moves through the battlefield as if it were an extension of his own body. He studies every micro-movement, every flicker of energy, every pattern in the Tensen's regenerative flow. Each absorbed fragment of Tao is a puzzle piece, revealing the rhythm of the island's elite forces. By the second exchange, he begins to anticipate the Tao's behavior, predicting where it will flow and when regeneration will lag just long enough for a strike to land. The Tensen's body warps violently, reshaping his form in desperate adaptation. Limbs twist at unnatural angles, his torso elongates, and his movements flicker between multiple positions in a single heartbeat, an attempt to overwhelm Jin-woo's perception. Yet the Shadow Monarch is unshaken. Shadows coil like liquid intelligence around him, cutting off angles of attack and intercepting movements that would have killed ordinary warriors. Each fragment of Tao that Jin-woo siphons feeds into his shadow network, reinforcing their speed, reflexes, and understanding. They begin to emulate microcycles of regeneration, learning the ebb and flow of Tao in real time. He is no longer merely fighting. He is assimilating the island's rules, bending them to his will. Finally, a critical opening appears. A node along the Tensen's core falters, regeneration lagging ever so slightly as the accumulated pressure of Jin-woo's attacks disrupts the flow. Igris strikes first, driving his blade into the node, sending a pulse of destabilization through the Tensen's form. Jin-woo moves instantly, shadows lashing outward to absorb the energy spilling from the wound. The Tensen convulses violently, Tao flaring uncontrollably, and for the first time he falters completely, falling to his knees. Jin-woo steps forward, daggers poised, and does not strike to kill. Instead, he channels his shadows into the Tensen, siphoning energy and knowledge simultaneously. The shadows coil around the Tensen's body like living conduits, pulling fragments of Tao into their network, reshaping them and storing the patterns for instant recall. The forest trembles violently. Roots recoil, flowers shiver along cliffs and trees, and the air itself thickens as the pulse of Kotaku Island accelerates in response to the disruption. The remaining Tensen pause at the edges of the clearing, sensing the anomaly. Their regenerative cycles faltering as the island redirects energy to counteract Jin-woo's intrusion. Yet each effort is met with anticipation. Every shift, every wave of Tao is absorbed and analyzed, then returned as a controlled force by the Shadow Monarch's army. Jin-woo's shadows now move with an eerie autonomy, striking, defending, and siphoning simultaneously. What had once been a singular, overwhelming force is now fragmented and mirrored within his command, their power magnified by the intelligence he imparts. The Tensen's strength wanes rapidly, Tao flickering and dissipating as the extraction continues. Jin-woo observes clinically, calculating thresholds, timing of regeneration, and the limits of its flow. With each passing second, the Tensen becomes less a threat and more a data source, every pulse of energy feeding into the evolving shadows. The surrounding forest seems to recognize the shift. Smaller roots retreat, flowers close their petals, and the massive constructs that had lingered at the edges of the clearing hesitate, as though sensing the dominance of a predator they cannot comprehend. Jin-woo steps closer, shadows coiling tighter around his daggers, ready to strike again if needed, but primarily focused on assimilation rather than destruction. Finally, the Tensen collapses entirely, Tao flickering across his body before being fully absorbed into Jin-woo's shadow network. A new consciousness awakens within the shadows, an echo of the Tensen's skills, regenerative patterns, and combat instincts. Jin-woo stands amidst the clearing, shadows crawling across the earth, roots and sand all resonating with the stolen energy. The forest pulses erratically, sensing a fracture in the natural hierarchy, yet Jin-woo remains the calm center, the apex predator who has turned the island's own elite power into instruments of his understanding. He does not speak, does not gesture. He only moves, and with each step, the shadows learn, adapt, and grow stronger, carrying fragments of Tao, knowledge, and power that will forever change the balance of Kotaku Island. The Tensen lies motionless, but its energy continues to pulse faintly, a residual echo that Jin-woo allows to linger deliberately. He does not destroy what he has conquered, he converts it. Shadows ripple outward, extending into the soil, intertwining with the roots, petals, and residual energy of the fallen elite, drawing every fragment into a coherent network under his command. Each shadow absorbs not only raw Tao, but also the combat instincts, the reflexive movements, the decision-making algorithms inherent in the Tensen's form. In seconds, the assimilation is complete. What was once a master of Tao now exists as a node within Jin-woo's shadow network, a fragment of living knowledge ready to be deployed as he wishes. The forest around him trembles violently, sensing the sudden reconfiguration of power within its midst, yet he does not flinch. He is no longer merely a predator here. He is a force rewriting the rules of the land itself. From the tree line, the remaining Tensen hesitated. They are elite, deadly, perfected over decades, yet their instincts scream a warning. They have never faced someone who does not merely confront power, but he absorbs it, repurposes it, and grows stronger in response. Jin-woo steps forward, shadows crawling across the sand like living ink, coiling and spiraling with controlled intent. He does not attack, yet the pressure of his presence is enough to halt the most disciplined warriors. Even Gabimaru and Sagiri sense it. He is no longer an outsider here. He is a variable the island cannot ignore, a predator whose influence spreads invisibly through every root, every construct, every pulse of energy. The first shadow-imbued Tensen rises slowly, a spectral echo of its former self. Its body flickers with shadow and light, Tao interwoven seamlessly into the network Jin-woo has constructed. It does not move autonomously in the human sense. Instead, it obeys the subtle commands of its new master, a perfect extension of Jin-woo's will. Each movement is precise, every strike a reflection of the knowledge it once held independently. The other Tensen watch in disbelief, realizing that the rules of engagement have fundamentally changed. What was once an unstoppable force is now an asset under the command of a single, unparalleled entity. The forest quivers at this display, roots twisting and petals shivering as if acknowledging the emergence of a new apex. Jin-woo does not linger to admire the results. He steps forward, merging deeper into the island, shadows extending and probing the pulse of Kotaku Island itself. The central flow is strong, chaotic, and alive, yet there is now a measurable weakness, a disturbance that did not exist before. By breaking down the tension, he has created a feedback loop, an initial fracture in the island's regenerative system that allows him to analyze its patterns in real time. Each absorbed fragment of Tao grants him insight into the hierarchy, the rhythm, the cycles of regeneration, and the intricate dance of life and death orchestrated by the island. He begins to catalog the emergent rules, feeding the data into the shadows that coil around him like a second skin, ready to implement with ruthless precision. As Jin-woo advances, the forest lashes out, testing him once again. Vines thicker than masts surge from the soil, twisting violently while massive petals snap forward like blades aimed to cut, pierce, and shred. Shadows respond instantly, intercepting and neutralizing the attacks without losing cohesion. The first Shadow Tensen joins the defense seamlessly, striking with refined efficiency. Its strikes precise, preemptive, and deadly. Smaller constructs drawn to defend the heart of the island are dismantled before they reach his position. Jin-woo does not hesitate, does not overextend, yet every action he takes is a lesson, a real-time analysis of the island's pulse. Every clash, every exchange, reinforces his understanding and strengthens his army. With the first Tensen assimilated, Jin-woo feels a shift in the rhythm beneath the soil. The central pulse quivers, more insistent, more aware. The island is awakening, reacting to the intrusion, recalibrating its defense to counter a force it cannot directly overpower. Yet even as the pulse intensifies, Jin-woo's shadows adapt. They move in preemptive synchronization, predicting attacks, intercepting energy flows, and striking with unparalleled efficiency. The environment itself begins to bend subtly toward him. The rhythm of Tao, the movement of roots, the flow of energy through the soil, all now partially mapped, partially understood, partially controlled. Jin-woo is not merely surviving, he is dominating, converting and reshaping the battlefield in a way that Kotaku Island has never experienced. Finally, a sense of calm settles over the clearing. Though the pulse beneath the soil remains restless, agitated by the intrusion. Shadows writhe like living tendrils, carrying fragments of Tao, instinct, and combat knowledge. The first Shadow Tensen kneels beside him, fully synchronized, a perfect echo of its former power, now under his absolute command. Jin-woo takes a moment to observe the forest around him. The roots still twist, petals still shiver, yet nothing moves without his awareness. The assimilation is complete, the first step in learning the true rhythm of Tao, and the island has acknowledged, however unwillingly, that a new apex has arrived. The Shadow Monarch has begun to turn the world of Hell's Paradise into a system he can manipulate, study, and ultimately conquer. The pulse of Kotaku Island intensifies again, louder, more chaotic. As if aware of the audacity of this intrusion, Jin-woo steps deeper into the forest, shadows extending and probing. The first Shadow Tensen at his side, ready to act at the speed of thought. The learning, the assimilation, the understanding of Tao through blood and conflict has only just begun. But already the balance of power has shifted. Kotaku Island, alive and merciless, has recognized that the rules it has enforced for centuries are now being rewritten by a force it cannot comprehend. A predator who consumes strength, bends it to his will, and transforms it into something far deadlier than it was before. Jin-woo is not just an invader. He is a master in the making, and every beat of Tao he absorbs, brings him one step closer to absolute command over the island's deadly ecosystem. The forest is alive in a way that defies reason. Even after Jin-woo's assault on the Tensen, Kotaku Island hums with restless energy, roots twisting underfoot, flowers shivering in impossible colors, and the wind carrying whispers that seem almost sentient. Gabimaru stands at the edge of the clearing, his expression calm yet unreadable, eyes scanning the shadows coiling around Jin-woo like living extensions of his will. He has fought countless enemies, faced execution, survived poison, fire, and steel. Yet the presence of the Shadow Monarch unsettles him in a way few things have. This is not fear, not outright terror, but recognition, an acknowledgement that the rules he has understood for survival are being rewritten in real time. He adjusts his grip on his blade, feeling the familiar weight, the reassuring curve of steel honed for death. Yet part of him hesitates. He knows instinctively that his next choice will define the line between life and death, not just for himself, but for everyone tied to this island. The murmurs of the forest grow louder as Jin-woo's shadows ripple across the soil, reaching toward the distant tree line and probing the depths where Kotaku Island's pulse is strongest. Roots coil and uncoil, as though testing the will of the intruder who dared reshape the flow of Tao itself. Gabimaru takes a deliberate step forward, boots sinking slightly into the sand that has been churned and darkened by previous combat. He senses the energy emanating from Jin-woo, not a chaotic force, but a predator's precision, a quiet yet absolute dominance that bends the battlefield to its will. Around him, other prisoners pause, sensing the tension, realizing that this is a crossroads. Kotaku Island watches, responding with instinctive violence, yet the humans here are caught in a moral storm far more complex than brute survival. Sagiri watches from a distance, her eyes narrowing, knowing Gabimaru better than anyone. She senses the choice forming in him, the internal calculation that will determine not only his path, but the trajectory of every confrontation to come. The tension that Jin-woo absorbed earlier still lingers in spectral fragments, shadows now imbued with Tao and discipline coiling around him like sentinels. Gabimaru's first instinct is to attack, to sever the unknown before it can dominate him. But his mind pushes past reflex. He recognizes Jin-woo's aura, the subtle rhythm in his movements, the quiet intelligence behind every shadow strike. There is no anger here, no need for vendetta. There is only efficiency, absolute control, and the unnerving certainty that resistance without strategy will lead only to death. The air thickens as the ground pulses beneath Gabimaru's feet, subtle vibrations that speak of the island itself watching, judging. He senses the undercurrent of power in the shadows, how they are not mere extensions of Jin-woo's will, but repositories of stolen energy, fragments of Tao repurposed, refined, and weaponized. Every step toward confrontation is fraught with consequence. One misstep, one overextension, and he risks not just his own life, but the delicate balance of power that the other prisoners and Asaemon depend upon. Gabimaru tightens his grip on his blade again, letting the familiarity of steel anchor him while he calculates the impossible. How to act decisively in a battlefield where the rules themselves are fluid, where the arbiter of power is a predator who bends energy, knowledge, and instinct into weapons beyond comprehension. Then, movement in the shadows catches his attention. The first Shadow Tensen, now fully synchronized with Jin-woo, steps forward, its spectral form flickering with borrowed energy, every movement precise and predatory. It halts, assessing Gabimaru, testing him, probing not for weakness in combat skill alone, but for hesitation, moral conflict, and decision-making under extreme pressure. The tension is palpable. Gabimaru knows that this is not an enemy in the conventional sense. The Shadow Tensen is an extension of a predator's will, an instrument of analysis and adaptation. and it will exploit the slightest miscalculation. His mind races. Kill it and risk drawing Jin-woo's full attention. Retreat and risk losing control over the battlefield. Stand still and calculate, yet even stillness is a statement, a choice that will ripple across the forest in waves of consequence. Gabimaru takes a breath, the kind that centers a warrior before impossible odds. His eyes flick toward the prisoners who had survived this far, then to Sagiri, who watches silently from the edge of the clearing. He sees in their faces the weight of expectation, the unspoken plea for strategy, for choice, for direction. He cannot act purely on instinct. The consequences are too severe. Every movement, every decision now carries layers of complexity far beyond survival. Even the assaymen pause, recognizing the anomaly, the Shadow Monarch, and how the presence of this new player alters the hierarchy of power. Gabimaru's mind processes faster than his pulse races. He has always thrived on precision, on efficiency, on controlled action. This moment demands all of that and more. Then the island reacts. Roots whip violently toward Gabimaru. Petals harden into blades, and the ground beneath him pulses, testing his reflexes, his ability to predict and adapt. Each threat is a probe, a calculated strike from the environment itself. Gabimaru moves fluidly, blades cutting through vines with surgical precision. Yet he does not overcommit. His strikes are controlled, measured, designed to create openings without drawing the full attention of the Jin-woo or destabilizing the delicate network of survival. The forest seems to pause, as if assessing the efficacy of his choice, acknowledging that this human is capable of reasoning under impossible pressure. His mind calculates the next move. The choice is clear: act recklessly and risk annihilation, or act decisively, strategically, and reshape the outcome. Gabimaru's gaze locks on Jin-woo himself. The shadows writhe, pulsate, and shift in tandem with the rhythm of the Shadow Monarch's movements. There is an intelligence here, a silent command that extends beyond the visible battlefield, a constant analysis and adaptation that challenges everything Gabimaru has learned about combat, strategy, and survival. And yet he does not falter. His choice is forming, a decision not dictated by instinct alone, but by awareness, calculation, and the unyielding desire to survive while protecting those who depend on him. The weight of centuries of execution, survival, and moral compromise pressed down on him, yet he stands resolute, blade in hand, eyes locked on the living apex that dominates the clearing. Gabimaru takes a deliberate step forward, boots pressing into the churned sand as shadows ripple around Jin-woo, like living extensions of will and intent. The first shadow tension shifts its weight slightly, a silent signal, testing Gabimaru's reaction. The forest itself seems to hold its breath, roots stiffening, petals pausing mid-sway, as if the island anticipates the choice he is about to make. Gabimaru's grip tightens on his blade, fingers flexing, steel humming faintly in response to his intent. He can feel the pulse of the island beneath the soil, the rhythm of Tao that Jin-woo has begun to master and twist, and yet he refuses to let it dictate his actions. Each step, each motion is calculated, a balance between offense and defense, observation and commitment. The Shadow Tensen moves first, stepping slightly to the side, forcing Gabimaru to pivot and redirect a blade strike. Its movements are precise, anticipating every reflex, every adjustment. Gabimaru notes the rhythm, the fraction of hesitation in its assault, the micro-delay in the shadow's regeneration, the subtle way it mirrors Tao patterns absorbed from the fallen Tensen. He does not strike immediately. Instead, he allows the shadow to probe, to test, to analyze, all while he observes, calculates, and forms a strategy. This is not merely a fight. It is a duel of understanding, a test of instincts layered atop intellect, a dance of predation and survival that stretches the limits of human perception. The pulse of the island surges violently, as if recognizing the anomaly, sensing that one of its elite has been repurposed into a weapon under a predator's command. Smaller roots surge toward Gabimaru, whipping violently, attempting to restrain, to divert, to isolate him. He counters with swift, precise slashes, neutralizing the immediate threat without overcommitting. Each motion is deliberate, conserving energy, testing the limits of response while his mind races ahead. He knows that any misstep could trigger Jin-woo's attention fully, that a single lapse would be enough for the Shadow Monarch to strike with devastating precision. Gabimaru does not hesitate. He moves with measured efficiency, a predator in his own right, yet fully aware that the apex before him is not a creature to be underestimated. Sagiri watches from the tree line, silent but tense, her eyes tracking every movement, every decision. She knows Gabimaru better than anyone and senses the moral calculus weighing on him. The prisoners behind him glance nervously, realizing that Gabimaru is facing something beyond brute force, beyond conventional combat. This is a moment of choice, one that requires instinct sharpened by experience, intellect honed by survival, and the courage to act decisively when the stakes are incomprehensibly high. The forest quivers again as Jin-woo's shadows pulse in anticipation, responding to Gabimaru's every calculated motion, adjusting, countering, learning in real time. Gabimaru takes another step forward, eyes locking with Jin-woo's calm, unreadable gaze. The Shadow Monarch does not move. He does not need to. His shadows writhe and coil in silent anticipation, a living extension of his will, each one capable of independent action, yet fully attuned to him. Gabimaru's mind races. Attack outright and risk annihilation. Retreat and risk losing control of the battlefield. Stand still and wait, yet even hesitation is an active choice. He weighs the options rapidly, understanding that whatever he decides will echo across the forest, affecting the flow of Tao, the behavior of the island, and the fates of those who survive this deadly ecosystem. A sudden surge of energy pulses from the shadows. The first Shadow Tensen steps forward, its body flickering with the stolen Tao, every movement precise, every strike calculated to probe Gabimaru's limits. The forest reacts violently, roots whipping, petals snapping, and minor doshi constructs moving to intercept. Gabimaru counters instinctively, slashing through roots, deflecting projectiles, yet he does not overextend. Every motion is an experiment, a test to gather information, and each reaction teaches him more about the rhythm of the shadows, their predictive patterns, and the underlying Tao that Jin-woo has begun to manipulate. The choice crystallizes in Gabimaru's mind. He cannot destroy Jin-woo outright. To attempt it would be suicide. Yet inaction is equally dangerous. He must engage in a way that asserts his dominance, maintains his survival, and preserves options for those around him. He steps forward decisively, engaging the first Shadow Tensen directly, blade flashing, not to kill, but to challenge, to probe, to force the predator into revealing its limits. Each strike is precise, targeted, exploiting micro-delays in regenerative flow and movement prediction. Jin-woo's shadows respond, adapting instantly, yet Gabimaru does not falter. He is committed, and the forest seems to recognize the significance of his choice. Roots surge violently again, but Gabimaru's movements are fluid, calculated, and efficient. Each slash creates openings for observation. Each parry gathers information, and each step tests the balance between aggression and survival. He begins to read the first Shadow Tensen as a puzzle rather than an opponent, noting the patterns of stolen Tao, the limitations of shadow replication, and the micro-moments where the predator's control is not absolute. With every heartbeat, his understanding deepens, not merely of the shadow before him, but of Jin-woo himself. This is not just a duel of combat, it is a duel of perception, calculation, and will. And Gabimaru has finally made the choice to engage fully, consciously, and without hesitation, knowing that the outcome will redefine the balance of power on Kotaku Island. Gabimaru advances deliberately, each step measured, every movement a calculated decision. The first Shadow Tensen mirrors his pace, twisting and coiling, its form flickering with fragments of Tao, a predator in its own right but tethered to a will greater than its own. The forest around them responds as though alive, roots shifting and twisting in anticipation, petals snapping in midair, and smaller doshi constructs skittering toward the clearing only to recoil at the palpable dominance emanating from the Shadow Monarch. Gabimaru senses it immediately. This is not mere strength. This is control incarnate. Every shadow moves with preternatural intelligence, every fragment of energy within them anticipating his actions before he even executes them. He tightens his grip on his blade, the familiar weight grounding him, while his mind runs through countless permutations. The first exchange is violent but precise. Gabimaru strikes, forcing the Shadow Tensen to pivot and shift, testing its predictive capacity. The shadows respond almost instantly, weaving around his strikes, absorbing minor cuts and redirecting them into the forest itself, subtly using the environment as a weapon. Roots whip and curl, slicing the air, while petals hardened like blades spin toward him, yet he moves fluidly, using misdirection and timing honed over countless battles. Each clash is a lesson, each parry a probe, each strike a calculation designed to extract information about the limits of the shadows, the rhythm of Tao, and the timing of Jin-woo's adaptations. The predator before him is not merely reacting, it is learning, evolving, and analyzing in real time. Gabimaru's eyes narrow as he observes. The first Shadow Tensen is fast, precise, but not flawless. He notes the rhythm of regeneration, the slight hesitation between absorbing energy from strikes, the momentary lag in coordination when multiple attacks arrive simultaneously. He begins to test these weaknesses systematically, forcing the Shadow Tensen to split its attention, to overextend, to reveal the microfractures in its otherwise perfect control. The forest itself becomes a secondary battlefield, roots twisting to intercept movement, petals slicing at angles, yet Gabimaru moves as though he is part of the environment, integrating the chaos into his strategy, exploiting the island's own aggression as a tool against the shadow constructs. As he fights, Gabimaru realizes something extraordinary. The shadows, while lethal, are extensions of a mind he cannot fully perceive, bound by rules that are not his own. Every miscalculation, every hesitation is magnified, and yet each fragment of information he gathers strengthens his understanding. He begins to move preemptively, anticipating not only attacks but the reactions of Jin-woo's network itself. With every strike and counterstrike, he maps the battlefield, mapping the pulse of the shadows, the residual rhythm of absorbed Tao, and the limits of coordination. Gabimaru understands that this is not just combat, it is a test of intellect, perception, and adaptability. Then subtle changes appear in the Shadow Tensen's movements. It begins to mirror Gabimaru more closely, adapting to his timing, predicting his maneuvers. Each strike that once caused him to retreat now finds openings, yet he counters, adjusting with instantaneous calculation. The dance escalates, a deadly rhythm of strike and counter, attack and defense, probing and adaptation. Gabimaru feels the weight of his choice, the necessity of engaging fully while balancing survival and tactical advantage. He knows that overextension could trigger Jin-woo's direct intervention, yet hesitation could cede control of the battlefield entirely. His mind operates at a level beyond mere reflex. He calculates outcomes, predicts responses, and adjusts strategy with razor-sharp precision. A sudden surge from the shadows jolts the forest. Roots erupt violently from the soil, forming walls and traps, while petals spin through the air like razor discs. Gabimaru flows through them seamlessly, moving with calculated grace, striking when opportunity presents itself, observing when resistance appears. Each action is deliberate, a balance of aggression and conservation. He begins to notice subtle fluctuations in the shadow's Tao assimilation, the slight delay after absorbing energy, the momentary lag in predictive coordination when multiple vectors intersect. He exploits these micro-moments ruthlessly, forcing openings, landing strikes that are not fatal but disruptive, destabilizing the network incrementally. The first Shadow Tensen recoils briefly, Tau flickering unevenly across its spectral form. Gabimaru does not pause to celebrate. He presses the advantage, forcing the shadow to overextend, to reveal the limits of its borrowed power. With every successful strike, he siphons not energy but understanding, internalizing the rhythm of the shadows, their response times, and the subtle patterns that dictate their movement. He is learning faster than the predator anticipated, adapting in real time, and in doing so shifting the dynamic of the encounter. The forest vibrates with tension, as though sensing the emergence of a new equilibrium, one in which Gabimaru is no longer merely reacting, but influencing the rhythm of combat itself. Sagiri's eyes widen as she watches from the tree line. Gabimaru's movements are fluid, precise, and terrifyingly intelligent. He is no longer just a human navigating an impossible battlefield. He is a force capable of challenging the extensions of a predator, whose very presence rewrites the rules of engagement. The prisoners behind him shift uneasily, sensing the dangerous currents of power at play, realizing that the balance of life and death on Kotaku Island is being rewritten in real time. Gabimaru does not falter. Every strike, every feint, every adjustment is deliberate, a reflection of his choice to engage fully, strategically, and without hesitation, knowing that this confrontation will define not only his own survival, but the fate of all who depend on him. Gabimaru pivots smoothly, eyes locked on the first Shadow Tensen as it flickers and coils with lethal precision. Every fiber of its spectral body hums with Tau, every movement calculated to anticipate his strikes. Yet Gabimaru is ready. He has read the rhythm, identified the delays, and now he engages with a singular purpose. His blade flashes, a precise strike that forces the Shadow Tensen to overextend, testing the limits of its borrowed power. Shadows ripple violently around Jin-woo, responding to the slightest disturbance, yet Gabimaru remains calm, controlled, a predator in his own right. The forest reacts violently, roots surging, petals spinning like blades, and smaller constructs rushing to intercept. But each obstacle is neutralized with deliberate efficiency. Every move is a message, every strike a test of balance, skill, and strategy. The first Shadow Tensen falters briefly, Tau flickering unevenly across its form. Gabimaru presses the advantage immediately, striking again and again, each blow designed to destabilize, not destroy. He begins to notice patterns, how the shadows respond to multi-vector attacks, the delay after energy absorption, the micro-moments when the system recalibrates. Each observation feeds into his instincts, enhancing his reflexes, sharpening his perception, and allowing him to operate within the battlefield as both warrior and tactician. Jin-woo watches silently, his shadows reacting with subtle shifts, but even the Shadow Monarch cannot intervene directly yet. Gabimaru's choice has forced a stalemate of sorts, a tense dance of predation and adaptation, with the forest itself trembling under the weight of their collision. Roots erupt violently from the soil, spiraling toward Gabimaru's legs, while petals spin with lethal speed, slicing the air. Yet he moves fluidly, cutting through the obstacles with precision, every strike calculated, every dodge perfectly timed. He is not just surviving, he is commanding the battlefield, shaping the flow of engagement while constantly probing the Shadow Tensen for weaknesses. Each successful strike is a learning moment, each feint a means to draw information. He recognizes now that this is the true test of the Shadow Monarch's power, not raw strength but adaptability under duress. And Gabimaru is thriving in this crucible. The shadows are not invincible. They are patterns, rhythms, systems that can be understood, exploited, and outmaneuvered. Suddenly, the Shadow Tensen lunges aggressively, a blur of spectral movement attempting to overwhelm him with speed and precision. Gabimaru sidesteps, pivoting with inhuman grace, and strikes back in a controlled series of blows, targeting nodes where Tao has been absorbed. The shadow recoils, its form flickering with instability, and Gabimaru realizes he has achieved more than just a defensive advantage. He is now subtly shaping the shadow's responses. Each strike feeds information into his mind, allowing him to predict movements before they happen. He is no longer merely reacting. He is orchestrating, manipulating, and bending the battle to his rhythm without ever breaking his focus. The forest itself seems to acknowledge the shift in balance. Roots recoil slightly, petals halt mid-spin, and the minor doshi constructs hesitate, as if sensing that the apex predator of the clearing is no longer solely Jin-woo, but a human whose precision, intelligence, and decisiveness have carved an entirely new layer into the island's hierarchy. Gabimaru does not pause to reflect. He presses forward, integrating the lessons of each strike, anticipating counterattacks, and forcing the Shadow Tensei to overextend, exposing microfractures in its borrowed Tao. Every movement is deliberate, calculated, and lethal in intention. Survival here is not about brute strength. It is about choice, calculation, and perfect execution. And Gabimaru has mastered them all in the span of minutes. As the confrontation escalates, the first Shadow Tensei falters again. Tao flickering inconsistently, its predictive pattern strained under Gabimaru's precise assaults. Jin-woo's shadows writhe, coil, and adapt, yet even they are being mapped, understood, and exploited in real time. Gabimaru has forced a dynamic equilibrium, an engagement in which the Shadow Monarch's extensions are challenged, tested, and manipulated. He recognizes the stakes, overcommit and risk annihilation, hesitate and cede control, act decisively and impose his will within the narrow margin of possibility. He chooses decisiveness. His strikes grow faster, more precise, blending blade work, movement, and perception into a seamless, lethal rhythm. The first Shadow Tensei collapses partially under the onslaught, spectral fragments of Tao flickering, destabilized but not destroyed. Gabimaru steps back slightly, assessing the effect of his actions. He has not won outright. He cannot yet, but he has forced the shadow into adaptation, into a state where his choices dictate the flow of combat. The forest trembles, roots twisting, petals snapping, and the pulse of the island reacts violently, acknowledging the emergence of a new balance of power. Gabimaru stands poised, blade ready, mind sharp, fully aware that his choice to engage, to analyze, and to dominate without overcommitting has reshaped the battlefield and forced the predator to respond on his terms. He looks toward Jin-woo, understanding dawning on him. This is not a foe to kill. This is a system to study, to manipulate, and to survive alongside. The first Shadow Tensei rises again, spectral form flickering with renewed Tao, yet now fully synchronized to Gabimaru's rhythm, a tentative extension of his own understanding. The battle has shifted. Gabimaru's choice to engage intelligently, decisively, and without fear has not only preserved his survival, but has begun to fracture the dominance of the Shadow Monarch's extensions. Kotaku Island itself seems to pulse with tension, aware that the apex has been challenged, even momentarily, by a human whose will, skill, and decisiveness are shaping the future of this deadly world. The forest quivers with a life of its own, each movement deliberate, as if the very soul of Kotaku Island is responding to the intrusion. Jin-woo stands at the center of the clearing, shadows coiling and writhing around him like sentient tendrils, while Gabimaru watches cautiously from a distance, the blade in his hand steady, ready. The pulse of the island beneath the soil accelerates, sending vibrations through roots, rocks, and sand, a warning that the apex predator here is no longer just a single entity. The island is awake. It knows something has changed. Every tree, every petal, every hidden construct seems attuned to the shift, moving subtly in anticipation, testing the intruders, gauging the extent of the threat. Jin-woo's shadows stretch into the forest, probing, mapping, adapting, but even they react cautiously as the pulse of the island rises, aware that it has been challenged in a way it never expected. From deep within the undergrowth, roots erupt violently, twisting upward like serpents in response to the disturbance. Massive, flowering petals, sharpened into natural blades, spiral into the air, flaring with energy drawn from the island itself. The smaller doshi and plant constructs surge forward, not randomly but in coordinated waves, testing the limits of Jin-woo's shadows and the reactions of Gabimaru. Even the wind seems alive, whipping violently through the trees, carrying whispers and faint vibrations that unsettle even the most composed observers. The island is learning. Every strike, every movement, every absorption of energy by Jin-woo feeds back into its consciousness. It reacts, adapts, and reshapes the battlefield in real time. Jin-woo does not flinch. Shadows coil around his arms, legs, and torso, extending outward to intercept incoming attacks, siphoning the energy of roots and petals to strengthen their reflexes. He steps lightly, calculating the flow of Tao within the forest, noting subtle pulses, micro-delays in regenerative energy, and the rhythmic patterns of movement in the constructs that have been awakened. Even the first Shadow Tensen, synchronized perfectly with his will, reacts with heightened awareness, coiling and striking with deadly precision. Gabimaru notes it instantly. This is no longer merely a fight against the Shadow Monarch. This is a fight against the entire ecosystem of Kotaku Island, alive, intelligent, and aware. The ground trembles beneath Gabimaru's feet as massive roots surge outward in coordinated strikes, attempting to flank him from multiple angles. He ducks, twists, and slices with measured precision, each strike calculated not just to survive, but to study the rhythm of the island's attacks. Each movement is a puzzle piece, revealing the logic behind the forest's aggression, the flow of energy, and the hidden connections that Jin-woo is beginning to manipulate. Gabimaru begins to adapt, moving as if part of the forest itself, using the environment to his advantage while probing the limits of both the island's sentience and Jin-woo's command over his shadows. The clearing becomes a fluid battlefield, a dance of predator and adaptive force, a deadly ballet in which every step could be fatal. The sky above darkens subtly, not from clouds, but from the island's influence, as if the forest's consciousness stretches upward to manipulate the environment. Light refracts oddly through leaves, creating shadows that flicker and twist independently of the sun. Jin-woo's shadows extend into these visual distortions, sensing movement, analyzing threat vectors, and adjusting strike patterns in anticipation of both Gabimaru and the forest's aggression. Gabimaru moves through this distorted battlefield with uncanny efficiency, reading energy flows, timing attacks between pulses of soil tremor, slicing through roots and petal blades with a rhythm of his own making. Each action is both survival and analysis, a continual feedback loop in which predator, environment, and shadow interact and adapt simultaneously. From the depths of the forest, a tremor larger than any before shatters the ground, sending smaller constructs flying in every direction. The trees themselves seem to twist unnaturally, roots snapping violently like whips, as though the island is concentrating its sentience into localized bursts of destructive energy. Jin-woo reacts immediately, shadows spiraling outward to intercept and siphon the raw energy, redirecting it to reinforce the network. The first Shadow Tensen darts forward, striking roots and constructs with surgical precision, feeding microfragments of absorbed Tao back into Jin-woo's network. Gabimaru observes, noting the limitations in reaction times and coordination even within this incredibly adaptive system. Each movement teaches him, sharpens his instincts, and enhances his understanding of both the predator and the battlefield. A massive petal, larger than a man, spirals down from above, sharp edges glinting with latent energy drawn from the island's pulse. Gabimaru pivots, blade slicing through the air to intercept it, while simultaneously reading the energy flow for weaknesses. Jin-woo's shadows lunge, coiling around the petal to redirect its trajectory, siphoning fragments of energy into the network. The forest pulses violently in response, and Gabimaru feels it underfoot. the vibrations carrying a message. The island is awake, aware, and it is evaluating its challengers. Every attack, every maneuver is observed and analyzed. Survival is no longer about brute force. It is about adaptation, perception, and mastering the rhythm of a sentient, reactive environment. Jin-woo steps forward slightly, his shadows extending like tendrils into every corner of the clearing, integrating with the roots, soil, and flora, probing for vulnerabilities, mapping the pulse of the island itself. The forest reacts instantly, roots and petals twisting in countermeasures, testing the adaptability of the Shadow Monarch. Gabimaru observes keenly, realizing that the battle is no longer only between individuals. It has become a dynamic conflict of intelligence, adaptation, and control. Every action he takes, every decision he makes influences the flow of energy, the movement of constructs, and the rhythm of the island itself. The tremor intensifies, radiating outward in pulses that shake the very air. Roots as thick as tree trunks coil and lash toward Gabimaru from every direction, splitting the soil violently, as if the island itself has grown impatient. Massive petals, sharpened like blades, spin and slice through the air, their edges humming with stolen energy harvested from countless creatures that had fallen before. Gabimaru does not flinch. He moves fluidly, pivoting and striking with unerring precision, every motion a blend of instinct and calculation. With each attack, he studies the rhythm of the island's assaults, identifying patterns in its pulse, noting slight delays in its coordinated strikes, and using them to his advantage. He is no longer just a participant. He is a counterforce, a human capable of challenging the logic of the living forest. Jin-woo stands at the center. Shadows coiling and writhing like liquid intelligence, each one reaching into the forest to siphon energy, absorb Tao, and anticipate threats before they even materialize. The first Shadow Tensen darts forward with surgical speed, striking roots and spinning petals with flawless coordination. Yet even they are challenged by the island's newfound aggression. Each burst of energy, each shift in the soil, sends micro-fluctuations into Jin-woo's network, forcing his shadows to adapt instantly or risk being overwhelmed. Gabimaru notices this subtle tension and begins probing, using rapid, unpredictable strikes to create temporary dissonance in the coordinated assault of shadow and soil. Each successful maneuver forces the network to adjust, granting him precious seconds to reposition, strike, and analyze. A massive root surges from the ground like a living spear, aimed to impale Gabimaru. Yet he sidesteps with fluid grace, blades slicing through smaller offshoots that whip toward him. Jin-woo's shadows respond immediately, wrapping around the root to siphon its energy, redirecting the force into a coil of dark power. The first Shadow Tensen joins, striking with preemptive precision to stabilize the flow. Yet even this highly refined system is strained under the dual pressure of Gabimaru's movements and the island's chaotic pulses. Every breath, every heartbeat in the clearing is synchronized with the tension of combat, a constant test of reflexes, perception, and understanding. The forest thrums with energy, alive in a way that is both terrifying and awe-inspiring, challenging every participant to rise above instinct and embrace strategy. Gabimaru presses forward, slicing through incoming roots and petals with controlled aggression, using the forest itself to mask his movements. Each strike, each dodge, each repositioning is calculated to force gaps in the coordination between Jin-woo and the island's aggressive responses. He is reading not just the shadows, but the flow of energy beneath the soil, the subtle tremors in the roots, the micro-delays in the spinning petals, and even the flow of wind through the canopy. He adapts on the fly, every maneuver sharpening his understanding of how the forest reacts, how the Shadow Monarch coordinates with it, and where the vulnerabilities lie. His presence is a challenge the island cannot ignore, a human mind bending the living battlefield into something comprehensible without losing sight of survival. Suddenly, a cluster of roots erupts beneath the first Shadow Tensei, aiming to pin it against the forest floor. Jin-woo reacts instantly, shadows lashing out like liquid steel to intercept, siphoning energy while countering the assault with controlled strikes. Gabimaru uses this moment to pivot, striking toward the Shadow Tensei's vulnerable edge, testing its limits. The spectral figure flickers, Tao destabilizing slightly under the combined influence of his strikes and the forest's erratic aggression. For the first time, the balance of power is not absolute. Jin-woo's shadows adapt, but they are momentarily forced into micro-corrections, buying Gabimaru a precious window to press the advantage, reposition, and maintain the rhythm of his own assault. The clearing itself begins to fracture under the strain. Roots twist violently, splitting the soil and creating jagged terrain. Petals harden and ricochet unpredictably, forming a chaotic lattice of spinning, slicing hazards. Even the wind seems charged with kinetic energy, carrying microfragments of absorbed Tao through the air. Gabimaru weaves through this deadly landscape with unparalleled precision, blade flashing as he slices through roots, deflects spinning petals, and positions himself strategically against both the Shadow Tensei and the surging environment. Each maneuver is a lesson, every strike an experiment, and every micro-adjustment a probe into the limits of the Shadow Monarch's control over the island. Jin-woo's shadows respond with increased aggression, lashing outward to maintain control over the terrain, siphoning the kinetic energy of roots and petals while stabilizing the network of Shadow Tensei. Yet even this remarkable adaptation is not flawless. Gabimaru notes the slightest inconsistencies, the micro-delays in absorption, the minute hesitation between simultaneous strikes, and the subtle lag when multiple vectors of attack intersect. He exploits these tiny openings ruthlessly, maintaining momentum without overextending, gradually reshaping the rhythm of the battle. The forest seems to recognize this shift, pulsing violently yet unevenly, as though aware that the apex predator it had relied upon is now being challenged by a human mind operating with surgical precision. The tremors grow into violent shocks, sending splintered roots surging across the clearing like writhing serpents. Massive petals, sharpened to deadly perfection, spin violently, slicing through the air as the forest exerts itself in a desperate attempt to reclaim dominance. Gabimaru moves with fluid precision, dodging, pivoting, and striking, each action carefully measured to exploit micro-fluctuations in the attacks. He is no longer merely a participant. He has become a conductor in this chaotic orchestra, anticipating the rhythm of both the Shadow Monarch's network and the forest itself. Every strike, every evasive maneuver, and every step is a study in survival, perception, and tactical mastery as he pushes the boundaries of what a human can achieve against a sentient, reactive ecosystem. Jin-woo's shadows surge outward, coiling and intertwining with the roots, soil, and flora, siphoning raw energy and weaving it into the network with terrifying efficiency. The first Shadow Tensei darts with preemptive precision, striking roots, petals, and constructs with surgical accuracy. Yet even it is being pushed to adapt constantly. Gabimaru capitalizes on these subtle lags, threading strikes through openings, forcing micro-corrections that ripple across the network. He observes the limits of adaptation, mapping the flow of absorbed Tao, and calculating the reaction patterns of the shadows with near-perfect clarity. For the first time in the clearing, the flow of dominance is not absolute. A human mind has begun to bend the battlefield to its own rhythm, creating a delicate balance between predator, shadow, and sentient forest. The ground trembles violently as colossal roots surge from beneath the shadows, attempting to trap the first Shadow Tensei in a deadly coil. Jin-woo reacts instantly, shadows lashing outward like living steel, redirecting the force while siphoning kinetic energy to reinforce their network. Gabimaru uses the chaos to press forward, moving between roots and petals with lethal grace, striking toward the vulnerable edges of the Shadow Tensei's spectral form. Tau flickers, instability ripples across the shadow as the combined assault of forest and human disrupts its seamless coordination. Jin-woo's network stabilizes quickly, yet the window of opportunity has been opened. Gabimaru senses it immediately, flowing through the terrain with controlled aggression, slicing roots, deflecting petals, and maneuvering in perfect harmony with the unpredictable rhythm of Kotaku Island itself. The forest reacts violently to his intrusion. Trees bend unnaturally, their roots snapping upward in coordinated strikes, while petals spiral through the air with blinding speed, targeting Gabimaru from multiple angles. Even the wind seems charged with a tangible energy, whipping violently, carrying fragments of absorbed tau and slicing debris in its path. Gabimaru weaves through this deadly storm, striking when openings appear, moving fluidly, always calculating, always observing. Every micro-delay in the shadow network, every imperfection in the island's synchronized assault is exploited with surgical precision. He is no longer just defending. He is shaping the battlefield, influencing the rhythm of both predator and ecosystem, forcing the forest to bend to the constraints of his perception and calculation. Jin-woo steps lightly, shadows extending outward like serpentine appendages, merging with the chaotic pulse of the island. He absorbs, redirects, and anticipates, yet even his unparalleled control is being subtly tested. The first shadow tension is forced into minor miscalculations, micro-delays that ripple through the system as Gabimaru probes relentlessly, threading strikes through the network's vulnerabilities. The forest thrums with energy, alive and reactive, yet responding not only to the Shadow Monarch but to Gabimaru's interventions. Roots lash, petals spin, soil heaves, and wind carries fragments of destructive energy, all converging in a chaotic symphony of adaptation, perception, and strategy. Gabimaru presses the advantage further, moving like a ghost through the battlefield, using each environmental hazard as both shield and weapon. He anticipates the path of roots, preempts the trajectory of spinning petals, and threads strikes toward points of instability in the shadows, forcing Jin-woo's network into constant recalibration. Every pulse of the forest, every micro-fluctuation of absorbed tau is recorded, analyzed, and exploited in real time. The forest is awake, responding with intelligence, yet it is being influenced, shaped, and tested by a human whose reflexes, perception, and strategic mind operate on a level previously unimagined within Kotaku Island's ecosystem. The clearing begins to fracture under the strain. Roots split the ground, massive petals clash in midair, and the kinetic energy of the forest pulses violently, feeding back into the shadows. Gabimaru moves like a conductor through the chaos, orchestrating his strikes and evasions with unparalleled precision. Threading through the rhythm of attack and adaptation, the first shadow tension flickers under the relentless pressure, tau unstable, coordination strained. Jin-woo's shadows adjust, but the balance of power is no longer solely his. The apex has been challenged, and the forest itself trembles in recognition, acknowledging the emergence of a human capable of bending, predicting, and exploiting its sentient aggression. Gabimaru pauses briefly atop a jagged root, blade in hand, scanning the battlefield. The first shadow tension rises again, spectral form flickering, tau stabilizing, yet now subtly influenced by Gabimaru's rhythm. The forest thrums violently, aware that the flow of control has shifted, if only temporarily. Jin-woo observes silently, shadows coiling and extending, yet the challenge has been set. A human mind, disciplined, precise, and decisively aware, has forced the living island to respond to its calculations, bending predator, shadow, and forest into a new, dynamic equilibrium. The clearing shivers under the tension, signaling that Kotaku Island is fully awake, aware, and now fully engaged in a battle that transcends mere survival, becoming an intricate, living test of strategy, power, and adaptation. The clearing falls into an eerie silence, the kind that precedes a storm of unimaginable magnitude. Kotaku Island's pulse is no longer subtle. It throbs like a living heart, each vibration radiating through the soil, roots, and air with deliberate, terrifying intent. Gabimaru crouches slightly, eyes scanning, blade ready, sensing the shift. Jin-woo steps forward, shadows coiling around him like serpents of pure darkness, their surfaces rippling with Tao energy harvested from the forest itself. He is no longer merely a predator. He is a monarch, an apex entity whose command over life, death, and energy extends into the very flesh of Kotaku Island. The shadows writhe and stretch, probing the terrain, siphoning energy, absorbing the aggression of the awakened forest, and bending it seamlessly into a lethal network of absolute control. Gabimaru's chest rises and falls, every breath measured, yet even he feels the weight of this new power pressing in. The forest around him shifts violently, roots twisting like coils of iron, petals spinning with blinding velocity, and soil erupting to form jagged barricades and traps. Each environmental assault seems intentional, guided by an intelligence that has merged with Jin-woo's shadows. The forest is no longer merely alive, it is an extension of his will, a breathing, thinking extension that reacts to threats instantaneously and adapts with frightening precision. Gabimaru realizes that this is the full extent of what the Shadow Monarch can achieve when his power is harmonized with a sentient ecosystem. The first Shadow Tensen flickers at the edge of the clearing, Tao pulsing visibly across its spectral form, coiling and uncoiling in perfect synchronization with Jin-woo's motions. Gabimaru strikes, weaving through roots and spinning petals with lethal grace. Yet the shadows anticipate him, striking preemptively, siphoning the kinetic energy of every movement to feed back into the network. He pivots, dodges, and counters with surgical precision, exploiting micro-delays in absorption and minute lags in the shadow's coordination. But each maneuver is more difficult than the last. He can feel the forest pushing against him, shaping the battlefield to test his limits, forcing him to adapt faster than ever before. Survival here is not a matter of strength alone. It is perception, calculation, and the unshakable will to impose order upon chaos. Jin-woo moves almost imperceptibly, shadows shifting and stretching, merging with roots and petals to form extensions of his consciousness that strike with preternatural timing. Gabimaru realizes that direct confrontation is futile. Even a single lapse could allow Jin-woo to strike decisively, and the forest would amplify that strike into a torrent capable of annihilation. Instead, Gabimaru focuses on observation, learning the limits of the network, testing openings, and threading attacks with flawless timing. Every movement is a dual purpose, survival and intelligence gathering, probing the predator while adapting to the environment that has become a weapon in its own right. The clearing trembles violently as roots erupt from the earth in massive coils, petals spinning like deadly chakrams through the air, and soil heaves beneath them. Gabimaru flows through the chaos, integrating the battlefield into his awareness, moving with a rhythm dictated by instinct honed through death-defying experience. He strikes at the Shadow Tensen with precision, forcing it to react, siphoning some openings from the micro-delays in Tao absorption. Each success is fleeting. The forest and shadows adapt instantly, the apex predator observing, calculating, and recalibrating its network in real time. Gabimaru's mind races, processing environmental feedback, shadow response, and the pulse of Tao energy with unerring clarity. The wind shifts violently, carrying with it fragments of energy that slice through the clearing with a sharp, metallic whistle. Jin-woo's shadows twist into the currents, absorbing kinetic energy mid-flight and converting it into concentrated tendrils of attack. Gabimaru ducks and rolls, narrowly avoiding the first strike, then pivots into a counter-assault, slicing roots and petals with deadly efficiency. Even as he strikes, he is reading, observing, noting patterns, and predicting micro-movements. Every clash, every avoidance, every strike is a study in rhythm, pattern, and adaptation. He is no longer just a warrior. He has become a participant in a living system, operating within its logic while subtly bending it to his own understanding. From the tree line, smaller constructs surge, roots twisting like serpents, petals spinning like wheels of death, but each is intercepted almost before it can reach him. Gabimaru moves like a phantom, threading between obstacles, striking precisely at points of imbalance in the shadows, forcing micro-errors into Jin-woo's network. He notices the faint flicker when multiple shadow tendrils intersect, the tiny momentary delay in absorption, the minute disruption when Tao flows through multiple vectors simultaneously. Each observation feeds directly into his instinctive awareness, sharpening his reflexes and giving him the ability to anticipate rather than merely react. The clearing begins to fracture further. Massive roots split the earth violently, petals collide mid-air in spinning arcs, and shock waves pulse outward, carrying kinetic energy through the soil. Gabimaru flows seamlessly through the chaos, striking when openings present themselves, retreating when new hazards emerge. Jin-woo's shadows twist and coil, siphoning, redirecting, and attacking. But each overextension is noted, each micro-delay exploited. The balance of power is staggering, and yet Gabimaru has carved a tenuous foothold, a narrow edge where human precision meets apex adaptation. The forest itself seems to recognize this, pulsing violently with energy, aware that the game has changed, and a human mind is now dictating micro-fluctuations in a battle once considered absolute. The clearing convulses violently, roots and petals lashing in a synchronized storm, each movement pulsating with the rhythm of the island's consciousness fused to Jin-woo's shadows. Gabimaru crouches low, blades slicing through jagged roots and spinning petals with uncanny precision, each strike calculated to exploit even the smallest hesitation in the network of shadows. The first shadow tension flickers as it adapts to his unpredictable strikes, Tao energy pulsing along its spectral form. Yet even this apex extension cannot fully anticipate the rapid shifts of Gabimaru's movement. He threads between the forest's attacks, striking at unstable points, constantly measuring the rhythm of the shadows, noting subtle micro-delays in absorption and coordination. Each observation feeds directly into his instincts, sharpening perception and preparing him for the next inevitable escalation. Jin-woo remains still at the center, shadows coiling around him like living armor. Yet every movement is deliberate, weaving through roots, petals, and air currents to reinforce the network of his extensions. He does not attack directly. He manipulates the battlefield itself, bending every natural and unnatural element to his will. Gabimaru senses it immediately. The forest is now a single, unified extension of the Shadow Monarch, each pulse, strike, and surge perfectly aligned to his consciousness. Even the wind itself seems weaponized, carrying kinetic energy and fragments of Tao in currents that slash through the air. Survival is no longer a matter of skill alone. It is about perception, timing, and the ability to operate within the flow of a predator whose control extends to life itself. The first shadow tension lashes outward, striking at Gabimaru with preternatural speed. He pivots, dodges, and counters in a fluid motion, striking roots and petals that serve both as shield and obstacle. The forest reacts violently, roots twisting and coiling to intercept, petals spinning in arcs meant to cut or trap, but Gabimaru flows through them seamlessly. Each movement is a test, a probe, a calculated effort to find openings within a system that appears flawless. He notices the faint flicker when multiple shadow tendrils intersect, a brief destabilization in Tao flow that lasts only a fraction of a second, and exploits it with precise strikes that force the network into micro-adjustments. Even within a system this complex, perfection is impossible, and Gabimaru is determined to find the cracks. The ground heaves beneath them as massive roots erupt from below, surging with violent intent to pin him against the jagged terrain. Gabimaru rolls, spins, and cuts with precision, threading his blade through a lattice of moving hazards, striking at edges of instability in the shadows while simultaneously evading the forest's attacks. Jin-woo observes silently, shadows shifting and siphoning energy with seamless coordination. Yet even the Shadow Monarch cannot fully predict the human, weaving through his extensions with such fluidity and calculated insight. The forest trembles in recognition, acknowledging the emergence of a challenger who operates not with raw power alone, but with a strategic mind capable of threading through impossible hazards. A massive petal larger than Gabimaru himself spirals down from above, edges glinting with Tao-charged energy. He ducks and pivots, slicing through smaller offshoots, using the momentum of his movements to shift the trajectory, threading strikes to force micro-errors in the first Shadow Tensen. Tao flickers along the spectral form, momentarily destabilized, and Gabimaru exploits the opening, forcing the shadows to recalibrate under pressure. He does not pause. Every strike, every dodge, every step is a continuous study of flow, rhythm, and adaptation. He has learned to anticipate the unpredictable, to read microsignals in the shadows and the environment, and to manipulate openings with precision lethal enough to survive against a predator that bends life itself. The forest responds violently, roots thrashing and petals slicing in impossible patterns, yet Gabimaru moves with lethal grace, each motion a calculated counter to the synchronized aggression of predator and island. The first Shadow Tensen lunges, coiling like a whip, Tao pulsating along its form, striking with lethal intent. Gabimaru pivots, slicing through the space where prediction fails, exploiting a momentary lag in coordination, and threads a strike that forces the shadow to stagger. Jin-woo's network adjusts instantly, siphoning energy, recalibrating, yet even this flawless system has been tested. The forest itself quivers, recognizing a human mind capable of imposing subtle dominance over its aggression, bending the apex predator's extensions into temporary dissonance. Gabimaru's blade flashes continuously, cutting roots, deflecting spinning petals, and threading strikes at points of vulnerability. Each action is precise, deliberate, and synchronized with the rhythm of the forest's pulse. He senses the underlying Tao flow of the island, the micro-delays in absorption across multiple shadow tendrils, and the subtle lag when energy is siphoned from the environment. Every observation feeds instinct, sharpening perception to a level beyond normal human comprehension. Even against an entity as overwhelmingly powerful as Jin-woo, Gabimaru finds openings, exploits micro-errors, and bends the battlefield's rhythm to his advantage. The clearing fractures violently as the island reacts, roots splitting the soil, petals colliding mid-air, and shock waves of energy pulsing through the terrain. Gabimaru moves like a ghost, threading between the chaos with surgical precision, striking when the shadows falter, retreating when the environment threatens to overwhelm. Each strike is an experiment, each dodge a lesson, each step a calculated measure of survival. Jin-woo's shadows twist and coil, siphoning, redirecting, and countering, yet the apex predator's extensions are no longer untouchable. Gabimaru has carved a narrow, fleeting foothold within the chaos, threading precision, perception, and timing into a human rhythm that momentarily challenges the flow of an entity that commands life, death, and a sentient forest. The clearing has become a maelstrom of life and death, roots writhing like serpents, petals spinning in blinding arcs, and shock waves radiating from every strike. Gabimaru moves through it with unmatched precision, his senses attuned to the micro-fluctuations of Tao energy, the pulsing rhythm of the forest, and the subtle lag in the shadow's coordination. Each strike, each dodge, each pivot is perfectly timed, threading through openings imperceptible to anyone else. The first Shadow Tensen coils violently, Tao pulsing erratically as it struggles to maintain synchronization under the relentless pressure of Gabimaru's calculated assaults. He is no longer just surviving. He is shaping the battlefield in real time, bending predator, shadow, and sentient forest alike to his rhythm, even if only temporarily. Jin-woo watches, shadows coiling and lashing outward, siphoning every shred of energy, manipulating every root and petal with absolute precision. He is the Monarch of Immortality, a being whose very existence rewrites the rules of combat and life itself. Yet Gabimaru has carved a narrow edge, a human mind capable of threading through his network's perfection, exploiting the micro-errors born of adaptation. The forest trembles violently under this collision of wills, alive and reactive, yet constrained subtly by the human instinct that moves with grace, speed, and deadly intent. Each pulse of the earth, each flicker of Tao, each movement of shadows is a dance of predator versus predator, human versus monarch, life versus adaptation. Gabimaru pivots again, rolling under a barrage of whipping roots and slicing petals, threading his blade toward a point of instability in the first shadow tension. Tao flickers along its spectral form, coordination momentarily disrupted, and Gabimaru presses the advantage, striking decisively but without overextension. The shadows writhe, siphoning energy, adapting instantly, yet even this apex network cannot ignore the persistent human precision that threads through every attack. The forest itself seems aware of the shift, pulsing violently, reacting to the interplay of wills as if acknowledging that the absolute predator has been challenged. Gabimaru senses it, feeling the pulse of the land, the subtle sway of energy, and the rhythm of shadow response converging in a precarious equilibrium that he can exploit with surgical timing. From above, massive petals spin in arcs meant to crush, roots coil in patterns designed to trap. Yet Gabimaru flows seamlessly, threading strikes, dodging, observing, and exploiting every micro-delay. Tao energy flickers across the shadows, roots fracture under redirected force, and petals collide mid-air, scattering fragments that Jin-woo's shadows immediately attempt to absorb. Every motion is a test of perception and calculation, a battle of wills and rhythm rather than raw power alone. The forest has awakened fully, yet even as it lashes out with relentless aggression, Gabimaru adapts, threading through the chaos like a phantom, striking with precision and forcing subtle dissonance into the network of the monarch. Jin-woo's shadows surge outward, attempting to anticipate every strike, siphoning energy, stabilizing the network, and reshaping the battlefield in real time. Yet the human at the center of this chaos moves with the intuition of 1,000 battles, reading patterns, predicting micro-movements, and exploiting every opening, no matter how fleeting. Roots lash and coil. Petals spin violently. Shockwaves of kinetic energy tear through the soil, yet Gabimaru flows through it all, blade flashing, strikes precise, movements seamless. The forest quivers violently under the strain, recognizing the audacity of a human mind capable of threading through its sentience, the network of the monarch, and the chaotic fury of the awakened ecosystem. Finally, the clearing falls into a tense standoff. Gabimaru breathes evenly, blade ready, eyes sharp. The first shadow tension flickers and pulses, Tao energy surging violently as Jin-woo recalibrates, absorbing the energy of the forest and its own extensions to stabilize. Kotaku Island trembles under their combined influence, alive and aware, yet constrained subtly by the human presence that threads through the chaos. Jin-woo steps forward slightly, shadows coiling, the network stabilizing, the forest pulsing in acknowledgement. The apex predator has been challenged. For a brief moment, predator and human exist in a tense equilibrium, a deadly dance of adaptation, precision, and willpower. Gabimaru lowers his blade slightly, eyes scanning, understanding the full scope of the monarch's power and the sentient battlefield around him. He has survived, adapted, and exploited the tiniest cracks in absolute power. But the cost of engagement is clear. In this world, even a human predator is measured against the relentless, intelligent force of the apex. The forest shivers one final time, roots retracting slightly, petals ceasing their violent arcs, and shadows coiling back toward Jin-woo. A fleeting silence falls over the clearing, broken only by the distant whisper of the wind through the awakened forest. Kotaku Island remains alive, sentient, and fully aware. Jin-woo stands at the center as the Monarch of Immortality. Yet Gabimaru has demonstrated the precision, perception, and calculated courage required to survive in a world where life, death, and Tao converge in an unending test of will. The echoes of this battle will ripple through the forest, shadows, and soil, a testament to the collision of human ingenuity and apex power. The tension eases slightly, the forest settling into a tense calm, and Gabimaru takes a deliberate step back. He has survived the impossible, adapted to an entity that commands both life and death, and imposed his rhythm, however briefly, onto a battlefield that was never meant to be tamed by a human. Kotaku Island pulses beneath him, alive and aware, as Jin-woo's shadows slowly recede, and the forest returns to its eerie, predatory stillness. The Monarch of Immortality remains unchallenged in potential, yet Gabimaru's choice, precision, and tactical genius have left an indelible mark on the awakened island. The tension slowly eases across the clearing, yet Kotaku Island remains alive, its pulse still reverberating through the roots, soil, and trees. Jin-woo stands at the center, shadows coiling and writhing like extensions of the forest itself, the true Monarch of Immortality fully revealed. Gabimaru, blade in hand, breathes evenly, eyes sharp, a human predator who survived the impossible. For a moment, predator, shadow, and sentient forest exist in fragile equilibrium, a testament to the clash of instinct, precision, and overwhelming power. The echoes of the battle linger, whispering through the leaves, a reminder that in a world where life, death, and Tao converge, even the smallest opening can change the flow of dominance. The clearing falls into a tense calm. The shadows retract, and the forest waits, alive and aware, ready for the next challenger.